Am I one of Duke Dennis' baby mamas? Yes, I am.
Oh my God, no, she's not!
I'm so freaking tired of girls calling boys performative for freaking drinking matcha, even though it's not performative. You know what is performative? When girls play freaking video games or wear skulls on their shirt. Because everyone knows girls don't like video games. They just like the freaking color pink. Yeah, I'll say it. Girls just like pink and they don't like freaking video games. And if they do, it's performative.
So we're going to do a little thought experiment. Let's imagine it's 1951 and we're sitting in a psychology lab at a college. You and 7 other people are going to be shown a simple line on a card and then 3 other comparison lines. Your task is going to be to pick which comparison line matches the length of the original line you were shown. This all sounds easy enough, but the gag is the other people in the room aren't actually participants. They're actors, and they're all going to confidently and unanimously choose the wrong line. So one by one, they point to a line that's obviously incorrect, and then it comes your turn. You can see with your own eyes that they're all wrong, and you might even know what the right answer is, but everyone before you was saying something differently. So what are you gonna do? This was Solomon Ash's famous conformity experiment, and the results showed us that at least 1/3 of the participants were going to go along with the clearly wrong majority. Essentially, these people knew the right answer, but the pressure to fit in and not be the odd one out was so strong that it kind of overrided what they already knew was real. And then when Ash interviewed the participants afterwards, some of them admitted that they started to doubt themselves because of everybody else choosing the wrong thing. And other people said that they knew the group was wrong, but they didn't want to be the odd one out or look strange and then risk rejection. So their fear of standing out was a lot stronger than their trust in themselves. And now you might be wondering what a 1950 psychology experiment has to do with today's video, but I thought that it was a great example of what we're dealing with in today's culture. I feel like we've been dealing with this whole conformity versus authenticity thing for decades, and of course the setting has changed, but the tension is still the same. But I'm also noticing culturally that there's this huge desire to be seen as authentic and real. And the difference now is that the pressure isn't just coming from 7 people or the people that are immediately in your life, it's coming from millions of people that you see on your screen all day, every day, because we're addicted, let's be honest. There was a few things that made me want to talk about this, but particularly I saw a video that was posted back in May by Hailey Bieber. It was a video of herself eating sushi while wearing a face mask, and to me it felt like any other video that an influencer or celebrity like her might make, but apparently it hit different and people were obsessed with that video. Slowly but surely people were replicating this video. They copied the mask, they copied the sushi down to the tiniest details, even the whole vibe of it all, and clearly something about it felt aspirational and maybe even luxurious. I'm not completely sure, but that whole moment showed me just how easily we are inspired and how easily we make things become trends, whether that's matcha or Labubus, or it's reading or it's wearing a tote bag. We are all so easily inspired. And perhaps because of how fast trend cycles go, we don't want to be the odd one out. We don't want to miss the moment, because sometimes that feels worse than losing a little bit of our individuality. But also weirdly, at the same time, we've created this culture where things like being real and being weird have their own rules attached to it. I'm finding that there's corners of the internet where people are calling you out for being fake weird or being a performative guy, like I talked about in a previous video. But I find it very ironic because the people that are doing the calling out also follow trends to some degree, whether they know it or not. I mean, we're all influenced. It's hard not to be. So with all this going on, it makes me question what it even means to be authentic when the whole performance of authenticity has become a trend itself. So today, that's what I want to talk about, this whole contradiction that we're culturally living in, because if Ash's experiment has taught us anything, it's that pressure to conform can be one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. We're all conforming, but then we're also all judging each other for conforming. So yeah, let's get into that topic. What's up, YouTube? I'm tinysey. Thank you for coming back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new. I hope you like it here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to my digital garden. But first, since we're already talking about authenticity and being ourselves, let's talk about something that makes me feel even more like myself. And that is what I'm wearing underneath all of these fall layers. That brings me to today's sponsor, MeUndies. The air is finally starting to get a little more crisp and the oversized sweaters are starting to come out. And let me tell you, nothing makes fall better than knowing I've got MeUndies on underneath. Their ultramodal fabric is super soft, breathable, and lightweight, which makes it perfect for the layering season. And just in time for fall, MeUndies has dropped their Halloween collection, which I'm absolutely obsessed with. I picked up a super cute set in the Death of Me pattern, but there are a ton of seasonal designs to choose from. Plus, MeUndies really does have a cut for every butt with over 20 styles and 100 colors and prints. Whether you're into something that's classic or you want to get a little weird with it, they got something for you. They also use sustainably sourced materials and partner with factories that actually care for their workers, which makes supporting them feel even better. And with over 35 million pairs sold and 90,000 5-star reviews, I'm clearly not the only one that's obsessed. Honestly, my MeUndies set are always the first thing that I grab after laundry day because they're actually just that comfy. And right now you can get cozy and spooky for less with up to 50% off when you go to MeUndies.com/tinysey and enter promo code tinysey. That's MeUndies.com/tinysey, promo code tinysey for up to 50% off. And a huge thanks to MeUndies for sponsoring today's video. What we're seeing is what I like to call performing identity, and it isn't necessarily meant as a criticism. It's something that humans have always done. We've always borrowed from each other's styles, from each other's mannerisms and ideas, but I think what's different now is how visible and accelerated the process has become. Instead of how we used to slowly draw inspiration from our peers, now we can just adopt these curated identities a lot quicker. So now we're in this era of cores. We have cottagecore, dark academia, clean girl, coquette, mob wife. The list honestly goes on. And in just the past few years, there's so many aesthetics that have become mainstream. And a lot of these aesthetics get repackaged in a way that you can easily take part in them. There's an easy way to look Y2K, look like a coastal grandma. If we take the clean girl aesthetic, for example, it's not only about looking like you are a very polished person, it's also about signaling wellness and having discipline. So it's also a lifestyle just as much as it's a fashion aesthetic. Or even with something like coquette, it's not just about wearing pink or bows, it's about performing a particular version of girlhood and femininity. And then there's the aesthetic everyone's talking about or debating about, and it's the weird girl aesthetic, which I find particularly ironic because even weirdness is now becoming scripted. It has specific bands and movie references, and there's a makeup choice that you have to make. And people are arguing that they can tell whether you're really weird or not, as if there is a right or wrong way to be weird. And to me, it just shows that they are also performing weirdness according to a script that thousands of others are also following. But we're finding that a lot of these traits that once would have made somebody stand out have now been boxed and labeled as an aesthetic or a core. And what makes this feel different from older trends is the speed of it all, because fashion used to trickle down a lot slower from the runways to magazines and then finally to stores. And there was a little bit more room for regional twists or even adding your own personal touch. But what we're seeing now is that an influencer might post a look at breakfast time, and then by lunch we're seeing a whole bunch of tutorials, we're seeing a whole bunch of people recreating that same look, and it might even become a trend. Like, there's not much gap between inspiration and then people copying or people also doing the same thing. A lot of the trends don't evolve as much as they just replicate, and it seems like it's not just a fashion thing, it's also with our personalities and how people talk, how we joke, how we film ourselves. We're constantly performing a similar form of identity, and research on influencer authenticity points to qualities like sincerity, originality, and spontaneity. But when everybody is performing those same qualities the same way, it starts to not feel as authentic. And with the way that society is so connected, it is hard to come off as completely unique or never before seen, because we've kind of seen it all.
Boring, yawning, sloppy, lazy.
And even when you do stumble upon somebody that feels really original or unique, they quickly become cannibalized and everyone starts to imitate and replicate that person. Like, maybe we could say Kai Cenat. Now everyone's kind of doing the same streaming sort of thing. Everyone's copying his method. So Things that are unique and original don't last very long in today's society. Authenticity itself feels more like something you can learn and you can perform over time. And being influenced has always been a part of being human, but the scale and speed makes this moment a lot more unique and interesting, to say the least. So if you haven't noticed already, I find that there's a very contradictory element to all of this. While we're seeing everyone start to get inspired and copy each other, there's also this huge wave of gatekeeping, and I'm not talking about the good kind of gatekeeping. Now, it could be people's knee-jerk reaction to the speed of things nowadays, and their only way that they know how to try and protect the little bit of originality and individuality that is still left in this world. But I find that it's not that productive. People are policing each other's authenticity and calling each other out for being fake. And I've seen a lot of these sorts of videos online where they're saying you're not really a weird girl or you're just hopping on trends. And a lot of people are commenting that it's giving that name 5 of their songs energy. And so this whole you're not really phenomenon has become its own genre of content. And there's videos analyzing whether someone is truly part of a subculture or they're just performing it for clout. And people claim that they know if someone's genuinely embodying a particular energy or they're faking it. And it's not just aesthetics or music taste, because if we think about the whole performative male discourse, that was where men were being policed for reading or going to therapy or showing vulnerability. We saw how people were very quick to accuse a lot of these men of faking it for attention. And a lot of the times in society, I feel like women are dealing with this a lot more intensely. Their interests, aesthetic choices, or personality traits are often getting scrutinized. Do you actually like that music, or did you just hear it on TikTok and now you like it? Are you genuinely introverted, or are you just romanticizing social anxiety because it's become more trendy? And we're literally just continuing that cycle to each other, but a lot more intensely because of all these videos and accusations. And I find this particular form of gatekeeping to be very hypocritical because, like I said, oftentimes the people that are doing the calling out are also influenced by trends, whether they know it or not, because we all are. And that's just how culture works. We end up adopting what we see around us because nobody exists in a vacuum of pure originality, and I think that's okay. Of course, it's nice to do research and really understand the things that you are getting into, but when it comes to something as subjective as being weird, I think that's not really a hill worth dying on. Sociological research backs this up as well. There's studies on social media authenticity that show that the self online is always suspended between authenticity and performance. These categories actually aren't separate, they're kind of intertwined. We're all performing to some degree, whether we realize it or not, and even the people who pride themselves on being real are also often performing authenticity because it's become its own sort of trend.
100%. I keep needing to remind myself that social media is a performance, but so is offline life. That is a performance. That is the biggest performance of it all.
So I feel like the person calling someone out for being a fake weird girl didn't even come up with their idea of a real weird girl all on their own. They got that definition from somewhere, whether it was social media, their friends, or even the internet. They absorbed it and now they're enforcing it on others. They're basically gatekeeping based off of a borrowed standard, but then they're presenting it as if it was their natural idea about what is and is not authentic. And this all brings us to the big philosophical question that's been at the center of this whole conversation. Is any of us really that original? Humans have been asking this for a long time, but it feels especially urgent because we can see how quick influence is spreading. And we're seeing how difficult it is to even discover something that's truly original without it slowly but surely becoming replicated within that hour. Every trend has a source and every aesthetic has its inspiration. Every original thought can usually be traced back to someone else who said it first, or something at least that's kind of similar. That's why we've all been seeing those comments that say, I have no original experiences, and it'll always be under a video where someone's doing something that they thought only they did. As the years go by, more and more so, we realize how similar we all are because of social media. We notice how we experience similar things in childhood. We think similar things. We're more so the same than we are different. And I don't think that means that no one can be authentic. You could still be true to yourself. But I think we conflate the idea of authenticity and originality with each other. So just because millions of people are also drinking matcha doesn't mean that you aren't being authentic when you also drink that cup of matcha. maybe your experience wasn't original, but it's still you. I really think that influence isn't only normal, it's necessary because it's how we learn, it's how we grow, and it's how culture evolves over time. We're social creatures, so we learn by watching each other and then sometimes imitating. It's not necessarily a flaw in our nature, it's just how human nature works. I mean, when we're kids, we learn to talk by imitating our parents and the people around us, and we learn how to dress by watching others that inspire us. Our taste in music, food, art, it's all formed through exposure and learning. So when you see somebody that's super fashionable or super good at art, whatever it is, they've all studied somebody else that was in that space before them. So nobody comes into the world with fully formed and completely original preferences and expressions. We're all just products of what and who we've been influenced by. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The problem isn't necessarily influence, it's pretending that influence doesn't exist. So if you're acting like you're on an island of pure authenticity, or better yet, originality, and everyone else is just copying, then the lightest way to put it is that you're delusional. That sort of delusion fuels a lot of the hypocrisy that we've been seeing online. We're dealing with that blurry line between being inspired and imitating others, and we don't know when one becomes the other. So if I see an outfit and I recreate it with different pieces, is that inspiration or am I copying? And then what if I use some of the same pieces, or what if I use all of the same pieces but I style them slightly differently? So we don't really know where the line's drawn, and that demand for total originality online is pretty much impossible because we're all consuming the same content and scrolling the same feeds, and we're exposed to the same influences, and then we're somehow expected to produce these completely unique and never before seen versions of ourselves. It's impossible. And that's not how culture has ever worked. We see that ancient artists learned by copying the masters, and musicians start with covers, or writers will read a whole bunch of literature before they find their own voice. And even then you can usually trace their influences, and nothing's wrong with that. Although it does feel refreshing to stumble across something that's truly new, that doesn't have to always be the expectation for everything that we see or do. And like I said before, nothing's created in a vacuum, and so in some way everything is a reinterpretation or an evolution. And even with the internet, that truth hasn't changed. I just think it's made the process a lot more visible and faster. We can see the copying as it's happening, which makes us very uncomfortable because it shatters that illusion we have that we're all unique in having these totally original experiences. But the important part is that even with all of the influence happening, there still is individual expression, and that shows up in the small choices that we decide to make. So how we combine things, how we decide to evolve a trend or put our own personal touch to something. Two people can follow the same exact trend and still somehow end up expressing it completely differently. Now, with all that being said, I also don't want to act as though there's never a valid concern about copying or trend hopping. I think there are times when it matters, so we can talk about that. First, I think we need to distinguish cultural appropriation from trend hopping because they're not the same thing. Cultural appropriation happens when someone from a dominant culture takes elements from a marginalized culture. And this is often things that the people from that culture have historically been punished for, or they've even been discriminated against for those things. And then people will go on to use that thing without understanding, respecting, or giving credit to that marginalized group. I think that's different from just hopping on an aesthetic trend. For example, when people get frustrated about the rise of the whole weird girl aesthetic, that isn't necessarily cultural appropriation. The group itself isn't really a marginalized culture in that whole sense, but I do understand why that would hurt because a lot of these self-identified weird girls talk about how they were bullied for their interests when they used to be younger from usually popular kids, and now they're seeing those same kids who used to mock them start to embrace weirdness as a trend. It's not necessarily appropriation, but it still is a dynamic that can feel very invalidating, and it is worth unpacking. Or for another example, if we take things like the bohemian style, if you've spent years being immersed in this whole bohemian culture, you'll know that it has a history, it has value and its own significance, but then suddenly we see it become a whole fast fashion trend trend where everybody is starting to buy these mass-produced boho outfits from Shein with no idea of what it originally used to represent. And I get why those sorts of things are frustrating. If you were that person who invested time and care into understanding, and now it's been flattened into this consumable aesthetic that's really stripped of a lot of meaning, then this is where I think education matters a lot more than just gatekeeping. If you've been a part of a space for a long time and you have the genuine knowledge and understanding about its roots, instead of gatekeeping, you could become that person that helps them understand what they're engaging with and why it matters and where it even came from in the first place. And I know sometimes it's like, why can't they do the work? Teaching creates those opportunities for respect and understanding, and if you don't do it, they're going to enter that space anyway. And I don't think the issue is that new people are interested. I think the issue is when people engage without research or any care, because that's when we start to see aesthetics, subcultures, and practices start to get reduced to these surface level styles without any connection to their deeper meaning. And a lot of people have probably done this accidentally, or we've tried something superficially before we truly understood what it was deeply. And sometimes we see that that surface level exposure sparks real curiosity and it leads to growth. And other times it doesn't, and that's okay too. I don't think either outcome makes somebody a bad person necessarily. The better question isn't, is this person authentic? But it's rather, is that person being respectful? Are they willing to learn? Are they giving credit where credit's due? Are they engaging in good faith? These are probably more useful metrics than trying to decide whether someone's interest is real enough. And honestly, sometimes people are just bothered because there are newcomers, not necessarily because they're being disrespectful, but rather because the mainstreaming threatens their sense of identity. And when a subculture or an aesthetic becomes mainstream, it usually loses exclusivity. And I do find that to be a very valid response and super relatable, but it's also something that we have to own in ourselves and try to change. It sometimes can feel like a personal loss, even if nothing tangible has been taken away from you. Not every case of trend hopping is appropriation, and not every new participation is a threat to us. The real challenge is balancing the natural spread of influence with respect for the histories, values, and communities behind the thing that we're starting to get into. So in the end of the day, I think we're all victims of conforming and being influenced by trends in some way, shape, or form. It's really hard not to be because we're all influenced by what we're seeing online or in real life. And we all perform some aspects of our identity, whether we're conscious of it or not. We're also all both authentic and performative, usually at the same time. And the Hailey Bieber sushi face mask trend really showed me where we are culturally, because millions of people saw that moment and wanted to recreate it, not because of anything nefarious or that they're mindless, but because humans are social creatures and we connect through all of our shared experiences and the different ways that we express ourselves. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is that when people get inspired and then they recreate a moment, the first instinct people have is to judge them as having no mind of their own or being inauthentic. I'm realizing we have no place to judge these people, as if we aren't also getting influenced in one shape or another. And it doesn't mean that we're all influenced to the same degree. I know some people aren't even on social media, but nonetheless, we weren't created in a vacuum and we've learned our behavior from somewhere. Essentially, nobody is better than anyone else because of how much or how little they are influenced. Maybe the solution isn't necessarily more gatekeeping or trying to sort people into who's real and who's fake, but rather we might need to have more grace for each other and recognize that influence is just a natural thing that happens to humans, and it's not inherently bad. I honestly think that this demand for perfect authenticity in itself is a kind of performance. It's a very weird trend, and it's something that we've absorbed from culture that tells us that being real is the ultimate virtue. But I need somebody to tell me what real even is, because we're all shaped by our experiences and the influences that are happening around us. I'm not saying we should never critique anything, and I'm also not saying that there's no difference between being respectful and engaging with something respectfully and then thoughtless appropriation, but maybe we can all benefit from being a little bit less judgmental and being a little bit more curious. So instead of going with your gut instinct to call someone fake, we need to ask ourselves why it's bothering us in the first place. Or if it's about protecting something, we can ask how we can protect it without shutting others out at the same time. Are these particular behaviors actually harmful, or is it just threatening our sense of being special? But for the people that are scared of being judged, it's nice to engage with things because you're genuinely interested and not just because it's trendy. But we also shouldn't have to beat ourselves up because our interests happen to overlap with trends. It's not showing that you're fake or anything. It's just showing that you've been influenced by culture just like everybody else. I think we're all doing our best here, and the environment is just moving so fast. It's hard to keep up. Honestly, I don't think the authenticity paradox is going anywhere anytime soon. Trends are still gonna happen. People are gonna want to follow those trends. People are gonna want you to be original, but it's gonna be impossible to be original. But hopefully at least we could get to a place where we acknowledge that contradictory system and understand each other. So what do you all think? Do you believe that authenticity online is even possible, or are we all just performing different versions of ourselves? I'm super excited to hear your guys' take. If you made it this far in the video, please comment the mirror emoji, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.